Just a few hours after it began, it was all over. The rain, the wind, the anticipation of where it would land, and the fear of what it might do. Slightly after midnight on Friday morning, Hurricane Hugo viciously attacked South Carolina with a vengeance never seen before in this between miles and miles of devastation. It is like a war zone here, a battle that nobody won. On the morning after, ironically, the sun came out. The blue sky and brightness somehow didn't seem quite right. By then, the water was calm at Charleston's battery. A few boats were coming back in, and we found one fisherman. No, two. The gazebo in the park was still there, and an old steamer trunk, and an abandoned car. It looked like most of the historic homes along the waterfront stood the test of time once again, as well as Hugo's fury. Most of the people left. However, Paul stayed the night.
What we didn't anticipate was the wind, and the wind was the carriage house behind this house. Apparently, we didn't know it at the time, but when we saw the evidence this morning, slates started coming off and coming through the windows, and so there was this shriek. I mean, you can't call it anything else, of the wind coming through the house, and it would build up to just, like this, and then every once in a while it was punctuated with breaking glass, and you just knew. And so when it shifted after the eye, it actually built to a crescendo before coming from the north. But when the eye went over, we said, okay, well, we know it's coming back. So we prepared ourselves for, a half hour of really hard wind and then something diminishing. And it didn't. It just blew like hell for 2 hours.
It was the wind, not the rain, that caused most of the damage. Trees were literally lifted from deep within the ground. Cars crushed, and walls blown away. The bridge to Sullivan's Island and the Isle of Palms was torn and twisted, and the residents who evacuated were left stranded on the other side. David, with his family, was still waiting. You have little children?
I do, and we're worried about school. My little girl goes to school out here, and so we don't know what will happen with that. We don't know where to put our family, especially without electricity. But, Charleston, people have good friends here, and everybody's with other family members or friends who are taking care of us.
So you're going to be optimistic?
Oh, yes, definitely. We'll be back here in the next couple of weeks.
We left yesterday, we went really across the street here over to the Brookgreen Motel and left our room during the eye of the hurricane because the roof was coming off. And
You're laughing.
Yeah, well, you can laugh now. It wasn't much fun at the time. It was sort of weird, really. I mean...
Most people seem to be quite optimistic, though, in the midst of this disaster.
Well, there's not much else one can do.
In Mount Pleasant, the destruction was as far as the eye could see. A massive truck flipped on its side, and a local donut shop with no windows. One of the most dramatic sights was this sailboat tossed into the middle of the road near Charleston Marina. At Folly Beach, the Holiday Inn was still standing, barely. Most cottages and homes were blown apart.
Ours is the house with the red wall. The house on either side went down. I guess this house is built old and well better than we thought it was. We used to have front porches on the front, and the walls to my apartment are out. So, but there's stuff to salvage.
This road right here?
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yep. Not too surprising.
Stuff out here in front that's yours?
Yeah, this was my daughter's. Now, I don't know how it got out here, but that wicker, that was a wicker elephant. That was in my living room, so, stuff was moving all over.
What are you going to do now, do you think?
I don't know. It's, we had a lot of time to think about it. It's not too big a surprise that we lost what we lost. It's just stuff anyway, so it's not a big deal.
Craig had just returned from Somerville to find the damage to his home an incredible horror. Soggy pieces of furniture slammed into the kitchen and torn mattresses stacked into a wet heap.
good. There's some stuff in there. Oh, look. Oh, look. That thing made it. All right. I hope it made it.
What is it?
It's trash. Oh, one of the rooms in the Omni downtown. Fucking sucks. Some water damage in there.
The power of water and wind that can leave a trail of destruction that is almost incomprehensible. Never before has a storm caused such havoc on our state as this one. There was David back in 1979, that was a minimal hurricane. And then Diana in 84 simply skirted the coastline. Many folks can remember Gracie back in 1959 that caused destruction from Beaufort to Charleston. But not even Hazel in 54, which practically demolished Myrtle Beach, had the punch that Hugo had. Hugo began its reign of terror a week earlier. On Monday, it crashed into Puerto Rico, leaving 25 people dead and thousands homeless. It skirted by the Bahamas, then headed northwest, straight for South Carolina. With winds in excess of 135 miles per hour, just after midnight on Friday, it slammed into Charleston, then plowed through the Midlands and exited the state into Charlotte, all in under 4 hours. A storm of this magnitude, traveling 20 miles per hour, with winds at the innermost wall of the eye circulating at around 115 miles per hour, causes the velocity of the wind on the right side of the center to be the greatest. And that is where most of the damage occurred. The area surrounding McClellanville received the peak of the storm surge, a 100-mile-long wall of water that powerfully pushed through anything in its way. Because of high tide, the surge was between 11 and 15 feet along the coastline. For homes built closest to the shore, there was nowhere for the water to go. Ones higher up and further back fared much better. The storm surge for the last major hurricane of the century, Hazel, practically wiped out Garden City and caused heavy damage to Myrtle Beach. South Carolina has since developed plans to respond to such disasters. More on this from Tom Fowler.
When Hurricane Hazel hit North Myrtle Beach in 1954, it was a simpler time. Long before Sputnik, there was no Weather Channel.
On Friday afternoon, prior to Hazel's coming in here on Saturday, I knew that there was a storm off of the coast, but I had no idea that we were in any danger. So approximately 10 o'clock on Friday night, I received a call from the Charleston Weather Bureau telling me that, or asking me if I was prepared for the onslaught of a hurricane. And I says, no, sir. I said, don't talk like that. He says, well, he says, we've got one that's definitely zeroing in this way.
With the approach of Hugo, a vast network of public agencies and officials swung into action to help South Carolina meet a new foe.
People will be notified.
In the basement of the Rutledge building in Columbia, an empty room becomes a command center in one day, the Emergency Operations Center.
Good evening, I'm Teresa Bruce, and this
Media, which did not exist 30 years ago, uses new technology to convey facts to thousands about one of nature's oldest threats.
County is still under a hurricane warning.
Armed with those facts, people take heed and stock up on supplies. Word spread rapidly by media, and neighborhoods moved into action. Yet even with an impending evacuation, essential services go on.
How long are you going to keep delivering the mail?
Till I'm finished.
You done finished?
No, until I'm finished.
Oh.
That's right, unless the storm comes.
Mail keeps going through, right?
That's right, we gotta do our job.
Okay.
Okay.
Prompt calls for evacuation led to a crowded but orderly withdrawal from Hugo's advance. In planning and the aftermath, although many agencies and officials play key roles, responsibility rests heaviest on the chief executive, the governor. The morning after Hugo, traveling in a 200-mile-per-hour Apache helicopter of the South Carolina National Guard, the governor and other key officials swooped low over hard-hit areas such as Sullivan's Island. The Isle of South Carolina National Guard, the governor and other key officials swooped low over hard-hit areas such as Sullivan's Island, the Isle of Palms, and McClellanville. Spotting a school surrounded by water, the aircraft circled, then landed. The school was an evacuation center for residents of McClellanville. Although it was set back far from the water and farther still from the ocean, It was surrounded by rising water and hit hard with an 8-foot wave, according to those inside. Cars were shoved together, and the people were shaken. The governor gave assurances of state health, heard their worries and experiences of a dark night, and then moved on to the next stop in the long day. At the Georgetown airport, the governor met a federal disaster relief official, himself on site to review the damage. In the air again, the copter moved over hard-hit Garden City Beach and up the Strand, landing in North Myrtle Beach to meet 6th District Congressman Robin Talon and senior United States Senator Strom Thurmond. Heading back to Columbia, the governor ended one day to begin the next with on-site inspections of damage in the PD. The plans were long in the making for a storm all knew would eventually come. The last big storm, Hazel, is a memory to few, history to most. Hugo now is reality, with thanks to those who planned and followed through to save so many lives. Lives which in an earlier time would surely have been lost. In the weeks and months ahead, the brute loss of so much can be tempered by this fact. Nearly all remain to rebuild.
This used to be a road here at Folly Beach, and over there was the Atlantic House restaurant, which was a landmark for tourists, visitors, and the residents. About 80% of the homes along Folly Beach have been destroyed. The barrier island's definitely the hardest hit, and inland destruction as well. We have a series of reports for you now, the first from Myrtle Beach.
This is Mark Schaefer reporting. For Myrtle Beach residents, it was a simple case of believe it or not, as parts of the popular resort looked more like East Beirut rather than the sun-fun city. Saturday morning, armed National Guardsmen patrolled streets and beaches, discouraging sightseers and potential looters. Although according to Staff Sergeant John Marshall, few problems had been reported.
Not so far. Most of the people have been very cooperative.
While Myrtle Beach braced for the full intensity of Hugo's force, most of the damage was superficial, with exceptions like the downtown pier, most of which is floating in the Atlantic. Portions of the city escaped virtually untouched by the storm. Others were less fortunate. On the south end near Springmaid Beach, a mobile home blocked traffic on Ocean Boulevard. Across the street, Tom Russo with the Myrtle Beach Chamber of Commerce surveyed the damage with optimism.
Well, we need to let people know throughout the area that, in probably days and weeks, that different properties will be able to receive visitors, ready for visitors to come in. So I think that'll be our job, is to let them know that Myrtle Beach still exists and we're here.
Most Grand Strand residents moved inland following Governor Carroll Campbell's evacuation order, but a few, like Myrtle Beach resident Craig Thompson, elected to ride out the storm.
Give the last kisses, and we tried to laugh it on through, we were joking and singing, but it went on and on and on, and finally it was just not, it wasn't funny anymore.
A few miles south in Surfside Beach, it gets less amusing. Here, the evidence of Hugo's destructive capability becomes graphically real as dunes were gobbled up and hotel pools fell into the sea.
Surfside's a lot worse than people thought.
The property owners have no insurance here? Like many, Ann Ingalls returned to a shattered home.
I was starting my own business, window tinting, but I don't even know if the building in Garden City is still there, so we're going to have to wait. They said the government was going to help for people that's homeless, so if they'll help us out, we're going to be back down here and start over.
You sound pretty optimistic.
Got to. I've got a 14-year-old I got to keep going. She's really hit hard with this. So, yeah, we just won't live on the ocean.
Donald Byrd was luckier.
We survived without a scratch, not even a broken window.
But for most along the ocean front, Hugo means major losses. Those homes still standing suffered major structural damage, while others simply moved inland. Dr. Paul Gaze directs the Center for Marine and Wetland Studies at USC's Coastal Carolina campus.
Well, they're in obviously a very difficult time. Materials and structures, many of these structures may no longer be inhabitable, even if they're still standing. What the situation will be with the new legislation and Beachfront Management Act, it's going to get tested now. We'll see what happens. It's going to be uncertain.
And just when it couldn't possibly get any worse, it does. Here in Garden City, authorities estimate nearly 95% of the homes are total losses. If Myrtle Beach resembles Beirut, Garden City looks more like Normandy Beach. Here, the storm created a terrifying chain reaction, as front row houses were ripped from their foundations and literally turned into missiles, some cutting a swath through the next 3 rows of homes. Yet in the midst of this devastation, there are those veterans of Hazel, like Jack Cockfield, who look ahead with optimism.
Oh, with time it'll come back just like it did before. It just takes time.
So people just will build here no matter what.
They'll build on this beach regardless of what happens.
And those like Mrs. William Squires, who are less optimistic. Think this will ever look the same?
Well, someday I might not live to see it.
It will take years for Grand Strand residents to dig out and rebuild after Hugo's visit. And with new beachfront management legislation, those years are apt to be fraught with litigation and controversy. Reporting from the Grand Strand, I'm Mark Schaefer.
We're in Georgetown, South Carolina, and it's as dark as it's been in Georgetown in 100 years. People in their homes are dining by candlelight this evening or with Coleman lanterns. And the devastation here, although it was significant, was not as great as it was in Charleston or in the Grand Strand area. However, as we were driving down today, we noticed that there was as much damage on the way as there was along the coast. The devastation that began on the coast extended well into the Midlands. Near Shaw Air Force Base, a daycare center, a place of carefree children playing just a few hours earlier, was laid bare to the elements. Jerry Hardy owns the building. He was videotaping the remnants of his property.
It's probably got $400,000 worth of damage to it, probably. It's devastating. All these people's out of work, going to be out of business. I think there's about 6 of them out of business now. It's something else. Something else.
As we proceeded down the coast Friday afternoon, the full effects of the catastrophe began to sink in. Virtually every building, every home, store, barn, everything had sustained damage. Most of the damage came from the vast number of trees that lay toppled, torn up by the roots, or snapped in half. At times, the roads were impassable, forcing us to travel on nothing more than cow paths to continue. As we got to Georgetown itself, the presence of the National Guard was far more pervasive. How many people do you have with you?
I have 90.
As we cruised through the streets of old Georgetown, it appeared